shoes, the cleats.
The color of their uniforms.
Their uniforms. Oh, I got to get my stool to stand on. That's right, Justin, whenever I appear on television. I can. How are you? Good. Do-do-do.
Watch this.
They had plans to start a riot at a Pride in the Park event in North Idaho. Now 31 members of a white nationalist group are facing misdemeanors? Why weren't those trying to incite hateful violence charged with a more appropriate crime? We got an answer from a prosecuting attorney. The Kuna rodeo is ready to get back in the saddle again, thanks to a local family sharing some of their backyard. How this return came to be more than 70 years later. And heads up, campers, the Idaho Department of Lands is closing certain areas because, well, people keep trashing them. Unfortunately, it's becoming a pattern in some areas. Can damaging campsites hurt kids? Yes, it can. We got a lot of response yesterday to our coverage of the 31 members of the white nationalist group Patriot Front arrested over the weekend in Coeur d'Alene. They were piled into a U-Haul truck along with what police called impressive preparation for a riot, including written plans to start a riot during a Pride in a Park event Saturday, and then they wanted to spread it downtown. So during yesterday's show, we broke down some of the rhetoric and the events that have led up to this in this state, throughout Idaho. Arnie texted us to say we've been given permission to be our own worst selves here in Idaho. Hashtag too great to hate. From Cindy in Boise, it's so disturbing that a bunch of white guys believe they are so superior than any other human that looks different than themselves or believes in different lifestyles. They should find another planet to exist, like leave the rest of us in peace. Ray would like to see more done, saying, my only hope is that our politicians will get on board with society and root out these organizations, out of this state instead of making them feel welcomed. Meanwhile, there's still a lot of questions about the men who came from as far away as Alabama, Arkansas, and Texas, and from, well, as close by as right here in the Northwest, including 2 from Idaho. There are also questions about the charges they are facing. Right now, all 31 have been charged with misdemeanor conspiracy to riot. So Jeff texted in yesterday and asked, why is the group that was arrested in Coeur d'Alene not being charged with conspiracy to commit terrorism instead of conspiracy to riot? Well, so we reached out to some of the prosecuting attorneys in the Coeur d'Alene area. The Kootenai County prosecuting attorney did get back to us. Basically, we were told that misdemeanor is the minimum they could be charged with, but that could change. Bear McHugh said there is an ongoing investigation that may provide evidence supporting such a charge, meaning the terrorism one. We are communicating with local and federal prosecutors to evaluate the best course going forward. They couldn't say much else, though, because the investigation is still ongoing. They could still find out that would warrant a stiffer penalty, is what we're being told. We also asked for evidence, examples of evidence that might be needed to change those charges, but McHugh said he couldn't comment because of the ongoing investigation. To clarify, though, Kootenai County, their lawyers, they're not prosecuting this case. The Coeur d'Alene City Attorney's Office is, and so we reached out to them as well, but we have yet to hear back. More than 70 years ago, the city of Kuna held its last rodeo, and it's something the city has tried to bring back over the last several years. But it's tough to have a bucking event without a bucking place to put it. Well, they found one. The Kuna rodeo will return this fall for the first time since the late 1940s, and even though it will technically be in someone's backyard, it won't be a backyard event. Here's Katya Stepovic.
Lenny and Cody Kitka have called this 25-acre lot in Kuna home for over 10 years.
And it was just a metal shop, so we've built everything within the last year.
In recent years, they've transformed their digs into a lot more than just a plain old lot.
This is where we store our Christmas and all of our extra things and my daughter's Disney records.
As of late, their storage shares space with a full bar and a stage for local talent, where this large gathering space is a host for community concerts.
It actually kind of started with this table, really. A friend of ours donated it from his shop, and we all started hanging out in here. And we were hanging out in here one night when Cody had the idea to start having concerts.
But recently, Lenny's husband Cody came home with a much more grand idea.
He came home and he said, "You are not going to believe this. You know, Kuna wants to host a rodeo and they want to host it here."
And they were doing a concert, kind of a private, public affair, more small. You know, are there any rules or regulations they need to follow? I'd been given a heads up by our council president that they were going to check in with us. And I said, "You have an arena? Then we need to talk."
So they did some talking, which eventually led to Kuna City Council approving $50,000 seed money and a handshake with the Kidka family to host the Kuna Rodeo after going dark since the late 1940s.
We are finally now bringing a rodeo back home to Kuna.
My parents just said, "Oh yeah, the city wanted to do a rodeo at our house, so we're gonna start building that." And I was like, "What?"
On September 2nd and 3rd, this arena that the family uses to train and practice in will be surrounded by nearly 3,000 onlookers that will be filled with dozens of competitors, including the couple's daughter, Peyton, who calls this her backyard.
This is Hot Shot Louise. She's my new barrel horse that I've been working with. I can see everything, the stands, I can just see everyone coming in and having fun, and everyone else competing in the arena.
The stands will fill, the food vendors and petting zoo will be up and running, but the journey to the finish line hasn't been small peanuts.
Did you ever think that you would be hosting a rodeo in your backyard?
No. And we talk about that all the time. We're like, this is happening, you know, and it's very exciting, but it's also very surreal because we do live here. I want it to be a good, positive event for everybody. I'm nervous about getting too busy. I'm nervous about not being busy enough.
All the stuff you don't think about, right? Fencing, you know, where are all the spectators going to come in? Where are the contestants going to be located? What are we missing? You know, we got to have everything set up so that so we can make it successful.
The efforts to make the rodeo a success are in full swing.
We still got to get buck and chutes set, bleachers erected, and there's a lot of work to be done, but we'll get it done.
The Kuna Rodeo will once again come to life.
Hopefully everybody bears with us. We're not going to be perfect, but we're going to try.
There will be no shortage of live entertainment. We've got 50 local vendors. We've got a petting zoo, live concerts, and even fireworks on the very last night. You might not be able to ride Hot Shot Louise here, but maybe you can pet her. There will be a lot of options. Tickets are on sale right now, $20. We'll link that on our website, KTVB.com. Brian?
Yeah, okay, so my question for you, Katya, this is the spot for this fall, but what about for years to come? Are they going to try to make this the permanent home of the Kuna Rodeo?
The family and the city both hopes that this becomes a forever home for the rodeo, but right now they're on a one-year agreement, so we'll see how it goes. But so far, so good. It's going to be up and running very soon now.
We're kind of breaking up on you there, Katya, but I promise you, the barrel event you're seeing in the background, the real barrel event is much more exciting than what you're seeing back there. So that's coming up this fall. Thank you very much, Katya. All right, rodeos, fireworks, community gatherings, all the makings of a great summer, of course, in Idaho. And speaking of summer, camping season is here, has been for a lot of people, despite the rain on the weekends. You know, Idaho has a lot of great places to explore and find adventure, but there is something that has impacted a lot of those spots in recent years. That'd be us, humans. All the baggage we bring, but we don't bring out. All right, Joe Paris joining me now. Joe, in recent years, there's a theme of these issues that we've been seeing. A lot of trash being left behind in some of our favorite camping spots.
Yeah, and you know, this isn't a rocket science segment, Brian. The problem here is that people are trashing Idaho camping and recreation areas, and the result of this is they're closed because nature needs to heal itself. So yes, when an organization does see a situation like this, like the Idaho Departments of Lands, they are forced to close down areas just to make sure that nature can heal itself and that people don't come in and do more damage to popular spots. And the latest casualty right here, popular spot in eastern Idaho. This is endowment land at the East Fork of Rock Creek in Power County. And tomorrow the area, it's going to close to camping and UTVs until further notice. The issues here will sound very familiar. After this past weekend, IDL found that people continue to leave significant amounts of human waste and trash at their sites. UTVs also appear to be going off trails, damaging the areas, leading to increased risk of erosion. Now we're going to show you, this is damage done at another endowment site that was actually near Post Falls, and this happened exactly a year ago. So we're showing you that these problems, they continue. We told you about these last summer. Now, no matter what land you are on, the Idaho Department of Land asks that everyone be responsible. Actions don't just impact the campsite. No, impacting endowment land can also have another impact, one you might not think of.
Unfortunately, there's a few bad apples that tend to ruin things for everyone. They'll go out in the name of having fun, but they'll leave trash and waste and destroy the resources. And that's a real issue for us, predominantly because we use this land to generate revenue for beneficiaries, mainly our public schools.
That's right. So fees collected for use of endowment lands, well, they take money away from public schools, because if areas that generate funds for public schools through fees, if they're closed, you can't collect that money for schools.
Last year, the endowment land across the state generated nearly $55 million for our public schools, and overall $88 million for all beneficiaries. So it's very important that we maintain the quality of this land. And while the Land Board has made a policy decision to keep the land open for public recreation, we need citizens to do their part to help us by protecting and preserving the land and preserving its revenue-generating potential.
And Brian, I know there's people at home saying, well, we take care of our stuff, we take care, we do our part. And that's great, but it's worth saying over and over again that you need to respect these places across Idaho, because if they're damaged, it's a really quick fix for the people that maintain them. They close them. And we've seen this in very popular spots across the entire state. Today we're talking about eastern Idaho. The example I gave a little bit north from where we are, but long story short, also with fire season coming, make sure that you're being very safe with open fires on camping grounds, whether it's endowment land or not. This summer's exciting, but it's not that exciting if the campgrounds are closed and on fire.
That number, 55 million, that surprised me hearing that that's how much money they generate.
Yeah, and the endowment lands, they do a lot on them. Recreation's only a part of that. And if, for example, an endowment land is compromised by a fire, the logging there or the other business done there, it simply can't be done. So that impacts all of us, not just a weekend trip.
Yeah, and I can see the text messages now. It's all the newcomers coming to Idaho. Yeah.
Clean up. Doesn't matter if you're new or old.
Thanks, Joe.
You got it.
You can't argue with the role water played in the population spread across the Treasure Valley, but a lot more is needed to keep a community from being squeezed out of existence. The town of Ustick in today's Get to Know Idaho, or what used to be in Idaho. And as you know, your input plays a lot into the 208. We share your comments, we answer your questions. We appreciate but cringe at your criticisms. Keep joining the 208 conversation. Text us 208-321-5614. And remember, keep them short and include your name in the hashtag the 208. We'll try to share as many as we can at the end of the show. By the spring of 1863, just before the formation of Fort Boise in, well, Boise, there were about 100 non-native people living in the valley. By 1900, 10 years after Idaho became a state, that population was above 19,000. And the makeup was still very rural, with more than 1,600 farms on more than 113,000 acres of land, according to the Idaho State Historical Society. About 896,000 of those acres were irrigated. 96,000 of those acres, were irrigated thanks to the 568 miles of canals and irrigation ditches that kind of spider webbed themselves across the valley. Communities can't grow in more ways than one without access to water. And pioneers had to figure out how to get water from the valley floor up and out into higher elevations like on the bench. And they did it relatively quickly, within about 3 decades or 1 generation. Time, water, and growth all come together to tell the story of today's Get to Know Idaho. You've likely seen or driven on Ustick Road. It stretches nearly 40 miles from Curtis Road, mostly straight to the Snake River, and was once on a timeline to become its own independent community until time and growth, well, got in the way.
Water, like time, can roll by undeterred, only altered sometimes by the path in front of it. A change in direction can change a lot. Water is what made the Treasure Valley productive and livable, and led to communities popping up all over.
If you're in a barren landscape, the next obvious thing is you need to find access to water.
In the 1870s, a canal system began to take shape, a series of ditches to take river water where it wasn't. Think the New York, Reidenbach, and settlers.
And by 1891, there were nearly 50 miles of canals that brought Boise River water as far west as Nampa.
Which meant homesteads and farms sprouting in spots south and west of the river.
We have Boise, who, central location, and we have a town of Meridian that had started to grow in 1893. And this Ustick property sat kind of in between the two.
160 acres claimed by Jacob Clemens in 1894, who filled them with orchards.
Anytime you have a product, you have to have a way to bring that product to market.
Back then, that meant investing in railroads.
And so the Boise Interurban Railway had a loop that took people and goods from Boise along State Street to Collister and to a number of points, and then back down along what we consider Ustick Road, back down into downtown Boise.
One of those investors of the Interurban Railway was a gentleman named Dr. Harlan P. Ustick. That's him in the top hat at the Golden Spike ceremony.
So this is where this name, Ustick, comes into the picture.
An ear, nose, and throat doctor from Ohio, Ustick also had an eye for business. And he had visions of building a town. So Ustick acquired some of Clemens' acres and laid out his plans and the plats by 1907.
So what we're looking at is the original plat of the Ustick town site.
And people were buying into Ustick's idea.
We clearly see the Boise Valley Railway line following this route.
You got a train track that runs through, you got water, now you got people interested in buying there. What came next?
And so he ended up opening a bank, and he served as president of a bank in town.
However, Ustick wasn't much of a banker, and it closed after just 3 years.
But they were also able to secure a mercantile store.
And even the orchards found success in the form of a cider house.
There was a Baptist church that opened and built a building. There was a Ustick school, and it really did operate as a true individual community.
A community that was cut short, much like Dr. Ustick himself.
And in 1917, he was visiting some of his mining interests in Yellow Pine, and he died of a heart attack.
After that, nothing could stop the life being squeezed from his town.
By 1918, we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, and we're in the middle of World War I, and things are changing. And interurban railways are no longer as critical because automobiles have become the primary mode of transportation. Boise is growing, Meridian is growing.
And becoming actual cities, while Ustick tried to stick with its roots.
And Ustick never elevated to that level, in part because they always were rural. They always maintained that rural profile, and they never let that go. Eventually, those orchards became subdivisions, and eventually the city of Boise annexed those subdivisions into city limits.
That was in 1995. Nearly 30 years after, you can still see some of what Ustick envisioned more than 115 years ago.
The original bank building and the original mercantile building are still standing.
And so are the consequences of change.
Change happens all the time, but change also leaves breadcrumbs. And if we can take the time to watch for that change and to see what has been left behind, there's always a story that we can learn from that.
You know, you can see those old buildings still on Ustick, west of 5 Mile, before you get to Cloverdale. They're right there. The town of Ustick lasted 50 years, 40 years after its founder's death, while the post office shut down in 1958. The school stopped teaching kids a year after that. Residents once tried to get those few remaining buildings listed on the National Register of Historic Places, but only the school was added back in 1982. While the Boise foothills are still green and lush, it's hard to imagine fire season is right around the corner. In fact, this time last year, that season was already heating up. We checked in with fire officials to see how this year compares and what we can expect the rest of this year. All right, if you want to get in on the 208 conversation, well, we're running out of time for today, but you can text your thoughts to 208-321-5614. As for time, we'll try to save a little today to share some of yours. You know, with all the recent rain and the cooler temperatures for June, a raging wildfire season isn't necessarily the first thing that comes to mind these days. But the official start of summer is about a week away, and it's bound to get hot. And hydrologists are still expecting Idaho to stay in a drought this year. It's a combination that means more fuels for fires. And last year, at the end of June, the Boise airport measured about 9¼ inches of rain and snow for the water year, which is below what we would normally see. This year, we're sitting in a little bit better spot, which is about 10.75, 10 1/4, 3/4 inches, which is slightly above normal for this time of year. So that's good. With another inch of rain under our belts, we wanted to see what fire officials are expecting going forward.
Going into the month of June, we only have 14 fires right now on the books, whereas, last year we're at 123. So it's been a huge difference.
That is a significant drop. One way to keep wildfires under control is for firefighters to start prescribed fires. It's a tactic land managers use to keep that extra fuel to a minimum. But to do these safely, well, it can't be too dry. Otherwise, those prescribed fires could turn into a larger wildfire. On the flip side of that, you can't start a prescribed fire if it's too wet.
With the amount of moisture that's out there, we've been really limited this year. And every year it's dependent, but this year we're definitely limited.
So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? So last year at this time, we were weeks away from being inundated with wildfire smoke from Oregon. Not yet this time, thank goodness. The Boot Lake Fire, remember that, igniting on July 6th and was the largest wildfire in the country at one point for quite some time. So far, so good, but we still have a long, hot summer ahead. Our big minded today of what is still happening in our forests and camping grounds by G. Smith. Grimes Creek is closed, still closed. They've been closed for over a year due to trash, human waste, and destroying the landscape. It's posted these areas are closed and why, but people move the barriers and they set up camp anyway. It makes me angry that it happens. It seems there's no respect for the area or the people that live there and use it. Thank you for pursuing accountability from Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai local government, prosecutors, and law enforcement. This episode of domestic terrorism must be recognized as such before another tragedy in our community, says Deb. We're going back to the camping and the use of the land. All right, let's punish the people who comply with the rules because of a few bad apples that break the rules. There seem to be a few more bad apples these days. And it's not the newcomers trashing our lands, it's the jerks, says Dan. Good point.